Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the criticism that we've seen recently as far as ad hoc judges, the appointment of ad hoc judges in the Supreme Court is concerned. The ramifications, of course, of the kind of criticism that is coming, its own on the system overall, and the way that even normal constitutionally aligned laws and provisions are made to look controversial is something that we'll be talking about. We'll also be talking a little later on about, of course, the reserved seats and the verdict, of course, with the Election Commission saying that they're going to enforce what the Superior Court of the country has said. With regard to this, we'll be talking about what we can expect in the next couple of weeks with regard to the overall political process. We've also seen talk of banning a certain political party, and of course, the fact that there doesn't seem to be any one opinion on this overall. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Shah Khawar, who's a senior advocate. Thank you so much for being with us today. We also have with us Barrister Safi Ghauri, who's a legal expert. Thank you for joining us. Barrister Talha, who's also a legal expert. Thank you for joining us today. And Muneeb Qadir, who's also a lawyer. Thank you for being with us today. Shah Khawar Sahab, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Shah Khawar Sahab, there is, as far as this appointment of ad hoc judges is concerned, how do you look at this? Can you just generally speaking, of course, this is, very much within the Constitution and it's something that has been done?
Yes, I believe that unnecessary hype has been created and the proposed appointment of the additional judges in the Supreme Court is being made controversial due to the political reasons, I believe. What I believe is that there is a need of appointment of ad hoc judges in the Supreme Court because at the moment there is lacking of the expert judges on the criminal side. And especially talking about retired Mr. Justice Tariq Mahmood, Sardar Tariq, who held the office of one of the senior judges of the Supreme Court who recently retired. And he used to head a bench of the Supreme Court which would deal with the hardcore criminal cases, and his record is very good. He would decide the cases in a very expeditious manner and in a very, very just manner. And we already heard that he was already requested by the Chief Justice to accept the office of the additional judge for some time, so that the backlog is there in the criminal matters, and there is high need that the judges may be appointed who may take care of the criminal matters pending in the Supreme Court. And there is already a provision under Article 182 which gives the power to the Chief Justice of Pakistan that he, after consultation with the Judicial Commission and after the approval of the President of Pakistan, may appoint as many as additional judges to be the part of the bench for a period which is specified in the order. So I believe that there is need of appointment of the ad hoc judges so that the backlog which is already there may be taken care of by these judges and adjudicated.
Shah Khawar Sahab, please stay with us. I'll come back to you. I'm going to go to Barrister Safiullah Ghauri. Safiullah, there is, what Shah Khawar Sahab is talking about, essentially also takes us back to the issues and the problems within the legal system. And we've spoken about this from time to time. It's not just the political cases. It's not just the cases that have, political consequences for political parties or politicians. There is, a lot of dearth of judges at this time. There is a system which is overflooded. And a lot of this, points out to dealing with that issue, no?
Absolutely. First of all, I'd concur 100% with what Shah Khawar Sahab said. Absolutely correctly pointed out. Article 182 gives sweeping powers to the government of Pakistan, to the Chief Justice, wherein they can appoint any number of judges for any reason. In this case, the reason has been pointed out, and it is a very good reason. Do we not have one of the highest pendencies in the world? We have 2 million cases pending. Now, if a judge who said on his inaugural speech that his goal will be to at least reduce this pendency considerably, and he will try and give justice to the common man, if he reaches out and if he starts appointing ad hoc judges, and he's not appointing one judge. If we were to appoint one judge, one could think that, this is the one person that he's favoring. He's appointing judges across the board. There are 4 judges that he named. Some of them have obviously turned it down because of the controversy that is being created by the political parties. But the reality is that these were several judges who were selected on their credibility in what they have done. These are renowned judges. They have a lot of reported judgments. And like Shah Khawar pointed out, that some of these judges have particular skills in particular areas of law which the Supreme Court currently lacks. So obviously, this was the right move. The problem here is that every single move that is being done to make the systems more efficient is being seen from a political lens and seen from such a polarized lens that we are unable to think of it as anything other than being extremely detrimental to Pakistan.
But there is the other side of it. I want to include Talha in this also. Talha, there is also the other reality is that we are living in a society where, even today and every day there are, a plethora of cases now being going to court which have political consequences and potentially huge consequences for political parties, for the constitution. We've seen one of those cases has been the reserved seat case also. So that invariably, for political questions to land up less in the court, are we doing anything, or are we, because that invariably makes it, it's what's the root cause of what's making it more controversial.
And I think that's something that's very unfortunate, that most of our political issues do end up in court, and the court ultimately becomes the arbitrator of them.
They don't want to, but of course they're in that position where they have to adjudicate.
Yes, but as far as the controversy is concerned, so we know that from Article 182 of the Constitution, there's 2 sort of like prerequisites of appointing ad hoc judges. Firstly, that for want of quorum, it's impossible to hold court. We know that that's not the case. But the article also mentions for any other reason. I think that the reason that the JCP or the Chief Justice of Pakistan has pointed out is perfectly valid. There is a pendency. However, because of the controversy that you have mentioned, I think that this somewhat is bad timing, because if the Article 182 is read with the most famous judicial appointments case, the Al-Jihad Trust case, the guiding principle in that case is essentially that there must be transparency in appointment. And I think the reason it becomes controversial is this pendency of cases has existed for the last 30 years.
So you're saying the timing itself? The
timing is problematic because this pendency has existed, but now when we start to do this move, I think it becomes problematic, it becomes controversial, and this is something that the Chief Justice of Pakistan should do a little bit better with, in the sense that there must be meaningful consultation with the Judicial Commission of Pakistan. And just one final point, these ad hoc judges that are eventually appointed, what wisdom would dictate that they do not form part of benches that decide these political cases, but only those cases that were in pendency before they were appointed.
Let me go to Muneeb. Muneeb, do you agree as far as the timing of it is concerned? In the sense that, of course, as far as overburdening of the legal system is concerned, that is something that we know it's a part of the problem as far as our legal system is concerned. And also, the fact that every day more political cases are becoming a part of the logbook as far as, the superior courts are concerned.
Yeah. So I believe that the government, the PMLN coalition government, has suffered a serious setback, legally speaking, even politically, with the recent 12th July verdict in the reserved seats case. And so a lot of, political analysts are drawing conclusions that, there might be some attempts at maneuvering the judicial setup and judicial composition. Hence, all of a sudden, this whole talk of appointing ad hoc judges has sprung up. But just like my fellow panelists have just said on your program, it's been made very much clear that the non-political cases, so to speak, the ones which are not pertaining to constitutional political issues, those are the ones which are to be handed over to these ad hoc judges, first of all. Secondly, as has been mentioned again by my co-panelists, Article 182 does give sweeping powers to the Judicial Commission of Pakistan, to the senior judiciary, that they can appoint ad hoc judges. At the same time, I'm also listening to certain voices which are dissident on this matter, and they say that many of the ad hoc judges that have been nominated are beyond the age of 65, and Article 182 182A of the Constitution requires all judges in the Supreme Court, in the apex court, to not be more than 65 years in age. Now, these kinds of technicalities definitely need to be worked out. But, the larger aim of being able to deal with the backlog of cases, I think that it's very unproblematic, and it's being made it's being made controversial unnecessarily. By reading too much into it, that there might be some political motivation behind this. You cannot make these sweeping statements or conclusions until and unless you have considered all the aspects of the law and the Constitution, which, I would like to repeat, very much permit, which very much enable the JCP to appoint ad hoc judges.
Muneeb, I want to go to Shah Khawar Sahab on this age technicality that you've mentioned. But overall, as far as, if these judges are not made part of the benches that are going to, decide these hugely political cases that are going to have hugely political consequences for all political parties, then of course this would die a natural death, the kind of controversy that is being created. Shah Khawar Sahab, isn't that true?
I believe that the proposed appointments are being criticized by the PTI and their supporters on the touchstone that it may affect the review petitions which are already filed or are going to be filed against the recent judgment in which the 8 honorable judges decided the cases in favor of PTI. I don't believe that it could be done because these are mere apprehensions. Because if you go by the Supreme Court rules, which clearly provides that the review petitions may be decided by the same judges who have authored or who has rendered the judgment. So the inclusion of the proposed additional judges is out of question, I believe. And another question has been raised by my very dear friend, Mr. Muneeb, that the qualifications to become a judge of the Supreme Court is that he must be, the retirement age is 65. All right. But if you go to the provisions of 182, it requires a person to be nominated or appointed as additional judge beyond the age of 65, because the qualification is that the proposed additional judge must not be have retired from as a judge of the Supreme Court not more than 3 years. So it means that a judge who was retired at the age of 65 and he is still at the age of 68, he could be even appointed as ad hoc judge of the Supreme Court. So the question of eligibility of a judge, a normal judge of the Supreme Court, and additional judge is altogether different. So and what is the wisdom behind 182 of the legislature? Because it provides that the Chief Justice, after consultation of the Judicial Commission of Pakistan, not the procedure which is meant for the fresh appointment, only there is a provision of consultation and with the approval of the President. Why this provision is there? Because an additional judge who has served the Supreme Court of Pakistan and he has been retired not more than 3 years beyond, he could be appointed because he has already served the Supreme Court for a considerable time and he is experienced enough to take care and adjudicate upon the different areas of law as judge of the Supreme Court. So there is a wisdom behind the legislature when they were.
As far as this issue is concerned, let me, before I go to the studio here, the question of our, legal system being overburdened, the issues within our legal system that we've, I'm sure that, in your experience, you've also encountered. What is the way forward? Because of course, legal reform is something that every government has talked about. We've unfortunately not closer to it today than we were 5 years ago. Do you think there will come a time when we will be able to move towards that? Because these measures may be, able to clog certain holes for a small period of time, but these are not going to deal with your problems that, you and everyone every day faces. You as a lawyer and those that are at the behest of the legal system.
Mahrukh, this is a crystal clear position that as per the data, more than 58,000 cases are pending in the Supreme Court. And if you have a comparative study, the institution is more than the disposal. So there is a need that the ideal situation would be that there is a constitutional amendment which increases the judges from 17 to more than that. Even I believe that there should be more than 30 permanent judges of the Supreme Court, but that could only be done by way of bringing a constitutional amendment. But presently,
for which you need two-thirds majority.
Provides a mechanism. Yes, of course. For that, there has to be a two-thirds majority. But now, in given circumstances, when we see that there is a backlog of cases, especially the criminal cases, equally, the civil cases are also supposed to be adjudicated expeditiously. But in given circumstances, the only way to increase the number of judges is invoking provision of Article 182 of the Constitution. And I believe, and the only problem is that there is a coincidence that there is a polarization and divide in our society, which also reflects in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, unfortunately. But go for the spirit, because if this number of judges are appointed, that will be instrumental in adjudicating upon the backlog which is there. Yes, one thing could be done, that as the Chief Justice of Pakistan, he is the master of the roster. He may not associate these judges. Yes, it could be done. And those judges who are proposed, those could be given the task of just deciding matters which are pending long way ago. So these arrangements could be done. And if these proposals are appointed, after a few months and in October, there will be a new Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mr. Sayyid Mansoor Ali Shah. Then he will be the master of the roster. He can just utilize the service of the additional judges just to take care of the backlog, not associating them in the political matters and the political motivated cases. So I believe that this criticism on the induction of the additional judges is nothing but politically motivated.
Right, fair enough. Safiullah, what I think Shah Khawar has really explained it really, well as far as the whole issue is concerned. But again, when we talk about constitutional amendment, two-thirds majority is needed. The kind of situation that we are in at this time, and we've been in this for a while now. There is never, there is always some political pandemonium. There is never that two-thirds majority. There is, after this reserved seat case, we're again looking at that kind of a situation. Yeah. And one had hoped that after these elections, whichever government would come in with that kind of a mandate, that they would be able to make those necessary reforms that are badly needed in the system.
Absolutely.
And legal reforms, are one of those things. Yeah. But here we are.
So that's what's unfortunate. See, the problem is this particular appointment of judges is being criticized as being politically motivated because of its timing. But when was Pakistan not experiencing bad timing? When was there not a big problem? When were there not extreme polarizations? And it sort of brings me to the point that now that the Supreme Court has been made wholly controversial, we are heading towards, once again, the parliament being extremely controversial by the fact that, PTI will emerge as the biggest party. They will then have the possibility of dismantling the present government by getting in with some other coalition leaders. One flip by People's Party can really change everything, or many other parties combine together as well. And so that's what the real problem is, Mahrukh. Political uncertainty has been pointed out by the IMF as Pakistan's #1 problem, by the World Economic Forum as Pakistan's #1 problem, by the World Bank. Anybody who talks to us, whether it be a lender who is a multilateral lender, whether it be a bilateral country like China or the US or Saudi Arabia, all of them, even Modi made fun of Pakistan when he said that we don't even know who to deal with because Pakistan's constantly changing sides. The problem is we need just a modicum of certainty in Pakistan for once. We just want, whether we like it or not, there might be a lot of disagreements, but would it not be wonderful if we could for once see a Prime Minister complete their term? That's what PTI has a problem with, right? Because they keep saying the same thing, that no Prime Minister is completing their term, and yet now they want to do the exact same thing that happened to them, which has been a sort of recurring circle for a very long time. So I unfortunately think that just the fact that this decision by the Supreme Court has come out is sufficient to scare away a lot of potential investors in Pakistan who no longer know what the next policy will be. A budget has come out, like it or not. This is a budget that a lot of investors now have in their mind for the next 1 year. But what if this uncertainty comes in of a government being toppled in a new budget, a mini budget being coming in? That will completely derail any potential investments in Pakistan that are taking place. And I just want to say here that for the last 1 year, we have managed to keep the dollar under control.
Yes.
Inflation has risen, of course, but that is as a result of our direct contracts with the IMF. For no other reason. Pakistan has actually agreed to those inflations. These are not forced upon us. So, and these agreements stem from the kind of previous deals that PTI had made. So, if we were to just for once honor our contracts with multilateral lenders, try and get out of this mess once and for all, it would be wonderful. But
do you think,
like you said, I don't think it's happening.
Do you agree with what Safiullah is saying? You think that Talha, that perhaps, you know, the time is now, again, you know, political dialogue is something that is being talked about over time. It comes up again and again. But invariably, do you think that, you know, we can move towards a kind of political dialogue, or, you know, with all stakeholders trying to ensure that the system somehow prevails?
Absolutely, and I think I love the basically suggestion by Shah Khawar Saab that a constitutional amendment is necessary, and while it is true that there is no 2/3 majority, I think issues of national consensus need to be discussed, and issues of national consensus need to be agreed by all parties.
But are issues of national interest going to be subordinate to political interest?
I think no one can say that for certain. This is something that all parties should go for. There should be parliamentary committees, all parties conferences that discusses these issues rather than issues that are of petty politics. But I think in the absence of this national consensus, if all parties do not agree, if we are to avoid controversy, I think that a better mechanism is essentially for elevation of judges, which is the proper procedure. Not saying that this is not proper, not saying that this is unconstitutional, but something that has traditionally been done is something that I think would not essentially be more prone to controversy than something that we're essentially seeing right now.
Muneeb, why not go down that route? You know, as far as elevation of judges is concerned, certainly ad hoc judges is very much part of the constitution, and I think Shah Khawar Saab explained that quite well. But, you know, going down that route might be less, you know, inflammatory. Muneeb, I think you're muted. Ji, now I can hear you.
Yeah, I don't understand what's so inflammatory about following the constitution itself, which does not prevent, actually enables the appointment of ad hoc judges, because ad hoc judges are going to be there for 3 years, and the whole raison d'etre for appointing those ad hoc judges is to be able to deal with backlog of cases pertaining to, you know, people with their daily problems who are unable to find any legal resolution to their issues because the court, the apex court, is so caught up with constitutional cases. So I don't understand what's so controversial with this particular route either. I think that this is the one that needs to be focused on, and news is coming in that the JCP has agreed upon Justice Tariq Masood and the other one, whilst the other two nominees have refused to take up the position of ad hoc judges. So anything which is happening within the constitutional framework. Otherwise, I can recommend so many other options as well. Why not have a separate constitutional court to deal with constitutional issues and leave the Supreme Court to deal with judicial issues? I mean, that could be another option.
But why I want to come to that, I want to, you know, there are countries that have, you know, separate constitutional courts. Do you think that we are a candidate for that situation?
When you've mentioned other countries, you know, what comes to mind is countries like Germany or France, and they're doing very well. And I think that there's a lot of scope in Pakistan for that. Why? Because a majority of the cases which I get to hear coming in from the apex court, I mean, majority of the verdicts and the cases that they're dealing with, or they spend the majority of the time on, are all political constitutional matters. And it seems that politics is now not being done within parliament, but it's being done within the courts, which is also not conducive to a constitutional environment which is, you know, in sync with the trichotomy of powers. So then why not have a constitutional court which has, you know, which holds expertise over matters pertaining to the constitution, rather than the Supreme Court becoming a political forum? So why not? Pakistan is definitely a candidate for such a reform.
Shah Khawar Sahab, do you agree? Do you think that eventually, if this situation does continue the way that we are seeing, the kind of cases which are, political consequences, constant questions of law related to the constitution, we can perhaps, think about a separate court, a constitutional court?
Yes, Mahrukh, there is a need that drastic changes are brought in the constitution pertaining to the judiciary and superior judiciary and appointment of judges of the High Court and Supreme Court, and increase in the number of the judges because of the fact that there is no balance in the backlog and the new cases which are presented before the courts. So the ideal situation is that there is a consensus in the parliament bringing reforms, short-term and long-term reforms in our judicial system. But the problem is that there is a great polarization, and there is a great distrust between the treasury benches and the opposition. What I believe is that if there is a consensus in the parliament and parties, that there is some comprehensive benefits in the constitution.
But Shah Khawar Sahab, you're breaking up. Your audio is distorted. Let me come back to you. Safiullah, like Shah Khawar Sahab is saying, perhaps it is a time to, but then again, for that we need, again, he's saying there's so much, bad blood, so to speak, between the treasury benches and the opposition at this time, that there seems, for there to be agreement, even moving in that direction, seems difficult at this time. As far as this case is concerned, as far as the consequences of, this case of the nominated seats are concerned, this was, for the judges, of course, it's a question of law. It was, clear cut, and they've given a clear judgment. The ECP has also said that they're going to proceed and enforce what the Superior Court has said. In your opinion, what is the best case scenario moving on from here? The opposition and the government both to accept and move together, and perhaps you think that's
what a difficult question. I'm actually not. What the best case scenario is for Pakistan? I think the best case scenario for Pakistan would be, this is my personal opinion, obviously, the best case scenario for Pakistan would be for a review to be fixed immediately before the ECP takes any action, or maybe the ECP delays the transfer of seats. For the review to then overturn the previous judgment, and for this government to stay as it is without any particular threats for a little while, so that there is some stability within Pakistan. However, what I'm saying here is clearly illegal. I am not obviously going to suggest that that is what ought to happen. This is what could happen if Pakistan were to benefit economically.
You're essentially saying you don't agree with the decision of the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. I think the decision of the Supreme Court is completely bereft of any idea of where Pakistan stands when it comes to Pakistan's commitments internationally. Clearly, the judges of our Supreme Court have not read a single piece of news article about what Pakistan owes the rest of the world and how we are currently functioning economically, what we need to continue this wheel to keep spinning. And I think that's what the problem is now. As a lawyer, I would clearly say that the judgment of the Supreme Court should be implemented in letter and spirit, that upholding the law is the best idea. But I also think that very clearly we are seeing that judicial decisions are being misused. And Pakistan is not the only country. I mean, right now, if we were to just look at Bangladesh, what's happening there, we see clearly what the Supreme Court there has done to their people, and now they have unleashed tremendous destruction all over Bangladesh. I'll say the same thing for India. I'll say the same thing for Nepal. What we are seeing is, we're seeing that courts around a region are being used to constantly push entire countries into a state of civil war. I don't think war benefits anyone. But be it, once again, with all respect to all the Indian decisions, all the Bangladeshi decisions and all the Pakistani decisions that have come out that may or may not harm our country, the reality remains that it is the people of Pakistan who then suffer at the hands of these people who do not understand.
But why Okay, but why can't we have, Talha, why can't we have an opposition and a government, whatever the decisions of the Supreme Court may be, whatever the numbers may be, you know, if one party loses certain seats or the other party gains, the question is if they exist within the purview of the mandate that has been given to them and coexist in the interest of the larger country, you know, in the larger interest of the country, instead of, you know, what political gain, because in the end, whoever, you know, if we have the elections after this, whichever government will get it will only get that, you know, whatever is left. So for this country and the interests of this country, for political parties to coexist seems to be in the larger interest, no?
I mean, no doubt about that. Obviously, they need to coexist. It's just that political realism has dominated our narrative so much that essentially we're seeing nothing but our personal interest in regards to that. But I think when Barrister Saab says that economics and all of these other things are international loans that we basically owe to them, all of the harm that is going to occur because of this decision or because of PTI being a larger party in parliament. Well, I think that that is absolutely true and that is logical. But if we hold democracy to be sacred and if we hold this system to be true, then I think that all of these things are consequential things that the country and the political system needs to adjust to. We cannot sacrifice our democratic ethos and our democratic systems just so we can have a little bit of stability. And that is where your question becomes very important, that this is something that all parties should come together to. I see some positive signs in the sense that when this reserved seats decision was going on, when Imran Khan, sorry, not this reserved seats decision, the NAB amendment, basically, the proceedings that were happening where the PTI chief, former PTI chief actually came into the Supreme Court via live stream, he actually admitted that we made a mistake by going out of parliament, by dissolving our parliaments, and we should have stayed in parliaments. And I think that that is something that's positive. The fact that the problems that existed between the federal government and the KPK government in regards to the releasing of funds, that problem being solved is something that is positive. And if this momentum can be carried on and something resembling an all-parties conference or a parliamentary conference where all of these political leaders and stakeholders do take part and take real stances on issues of national consensus, I think this is something that actually can be achieved, and I would not be so pessimistic
Shah
to say it
Khawar
can't.
do you agree? You think that, you know, as far as as far as, you know, your lord, you know, my lordships or as the superior judges of the Supreme Court cannot at this time look at what, you know, what the situation, the real political situation is, what is the reality at this time, the implications, you know, of course, and later on history may not look at them, you know, favorably if they were to go down that route. For them, it has to be questions of law. Isn't that true? Shah Khawar Saab, can you hear me? I think there's a problem with audio. Muneeb, the same question to you if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can.
So do you think that it's you know, for them it has to be question of law, right? For them it has to be what is before them. They can't look at the overall situation, what is the real situation, the interests overall, you know, other considerations can play a part, but they can't form you know, the only consideration for them. For them it has to be about the law at the end of the day.
Are we talking about the Supreme Court here?
Yes. The Supreme Court with regard
All
to
right.
the political cases. Ji.
I mean, you know, Barrister Safi just mentioned here that the courts have not been reading newspapers and they are not looking at the economic situation or indicators of the country. Now, in a way, I agree with him. It's concerning, but at the same time, I'm also relieved that they're not reading newspapers because to ensure judicial independence, it's best that they don't get swayed by what is being said in the media or by extra legal considerations. But having said that, you know, these matters, you know, we should not even reach that stage where the Supreme Court is required to know about the economic conditions of the country, because that is clearly not the Supreme Court's domain.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that's what I have been at pains to, you know, stress upon. The thing is that the Supreme Court's verdict in the reserve seats cases is, and it feels politically driven. I might be wrong, but that's my analysis. I feel it's very much politically driven because there have been these soundings, and also because I think that the PTI's lobbying efforts in the US and in other platforms has worked so much that an impression was being created as if the judiciary are not independent. So they went against their own previous, jurisprudence. It's the same Supreme Court which had said that the intra-party polls had not gone accurately, had not gone correctly within the PTI, and so they could not use the bat symbol. And they never clarified what losing the bat symbol meant. And months later, when the elections and by-elections have happened, now the Supreme Court, or the majority of it, says that, oh, PTI remained a political party. That we already knew. And that their candidates could contest under PTI's banner. You could have clarified that months ago then. So it seems that the decision was not motivated much by the legality as much as the political aspects of the issue. And that is why I think that the ECP, it's very good that they want to execute the Supreme Court's verdict in the reserved seats case, but they should hold their horses, because even the ECP in their letter to the Supreme Court have sounded their doubts about, number one, that who within PTI should we contact for verification? If within 15 days we get certain independent candidates, so to speak, saying that they affiliate themselves with PTI, who is the go-to person within PTI? Who's the focal person in PTI? Because, they don't have any structure. There's a lack of structure there. So those issues even ECP is aware of. It would be very difficult for the ECP to execute the reserve seats decision of the Supreme Court. In fact, as the Supreme Court has indicated, after their vacation period, after their holiday period, after the recess, when they would reopen, only then they can take up, the PMLN's review petition. And so everybody needs to hold their horses until then.
Yeah. Do you agree, Safullah? I think that's one of some of the points that Muneeb has mentioned are very pertinent, because while it is a political party, what is the structure?
Yeah, and I will add to one more point, which I think, and Muneeb very rightly pointed out, a series of defects in the judgment, which are, let's look at the central aspect of why this took place. The entire matter took place because there were no intra-party elections within PTI. The Supreme Court didn't even bother talking about it. The one singular issue that led to the entire issue, the Supreme Court has not addressed it in their extremely vehemently sort of like pro-PTI judgment. So the fact remains that the Supreme Court seems to have jumped a gun. I am not talking about that. So I think this is one of the reasons why I do firmly believe that the review petition is likely to succeed, because many important issues that were initially put forward were not even talked about. And of course, then there are several other decisions that are yet to come. Some of them had short orders for reasons to be recorded later. So I want to know what those reasons are. I want to know how this decision was reached. But also, at this stage, I want to talk about another important aspect, which is the kind of bias that judges would have. Muneeb pointed towards the US funding that we already have cases for when it comes to the foreign funding cases and many other lobbying firms that the US, that the PTI is engaged in the US. But an overwhelming amount of bias can also come in by the consistent propaganda that the PTI was trying to get a constitutional amendment to extend the tenure of the Chief Justice. And this was a constant murmur all around Islamabad. This was being talked about on news channels. This was constantly being alleged by PTI. And so all the judges who are then next to Qazi Fazisa ended up giving a decision against it, thereby making a soft coup within the Supreme Court, and that has led to a considerable division within the Supreme Court, which is very sad. To be honest, one would expect that at least the senior judges could agree upon such important, pertinent matters. And if our most educated people cannot agree on these matters, what to expect of the Parliament, which would then be a much larger forum, and also a considerably less educated forum. We would expect them to sort of reach a consensus.
With due respect to Parliament.
With due respect to Parliament.
Talha, do you agree with what Safiullah is saying? I think, there are of course issues which Muneeb has mentioned and Safi has agreed with. There is of course, these issues need to be thrashed out. But in the meantime, do you expect this, I mean, of course, this time period of 2 months, technically, of course, things will go ahead in the meantime, no?
Yeah, and just with the utmost respect to all panelists, it is true that there was no specific outright clarification given on what taking the bat symbol away means. But I think that it's what it basically means is the bat symbol was taken away. They cannot use the bat symbol, and the reason for that is because if we assume that taking away the bat symbol means a ban on PTI or that PTI does not exist, then that is, I think, absolutely incorrect. Because the way to ban a party is through the proper channels of the political parties ordinance of 2002, section 15(1), which basically says that a declaration must be made and then that declaration is confirmed or denied by the Supreme Court. I think none of that happened. So the Supreme Court, all the judges that were part of the bench who declared PTI to be a valid political party, I don't think there was anything wrong with that. However, there are other defects within the judgment. So for example, Article 51(6) of the Constitution says that independents must declare their party affiliation within 3 days. In the judgment, we see it to be 15 days. So we can see that there is some element of bias towards one political party, that is clear. But the fact that this decision in itself was something that was either patently illegal or that it was patently irregular, that is something that is not true.
But this itself, this point of 3 days, 15 days, will necessarily come up in the review, right? I mean, one expects these issues to be dealt with in the review.
Yes, but review, the scope of review.
Again, yeah, that's what I'm saying. The scope itself is quite limited.
It's very narrow. It's either an irregularity or an illegality.
But does this come out as an irregularity? I know I'm running out of time, but quickly, do you think?
Yeah, it may come out as an irregularity in the sense that it should have been 3 days and not 15 days.
But it would primarily remain. I think
that does not basically invalidate or nullify the judgment.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for being with us today. Muneeb Qadir, thank you for joining us. Shah Khawar Saab, thank you for being with us. Safi Ghauri, thank you for being with us. Talha, Khawaja, thank you for joining us today. Overall, of course, one would want there to be, in the interests of some kind of stability moving forward, economically, legally speaking, to move towards the kind of reform that we've spoken about from time to time, to move towards solutions as far as economics is concerned, as far as the legal our law is concerned, our plethora of cases that are overburdened, our courts are overburdened. Overall, the problems within the legal system or in governance cannot be dealt with without main scale reform. And are we moving towards reform? Are we any closer to reform than we were years ago, is a question that I'll leave you with. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.